The Story of Me is brought to you by Liuna, Ontario Provincial District Council. Liuna, feel the power. Greetings, author, securities analyst wizard, veteran politician who, if I can remember correctly, made history in his own community and beyond. Our guest has been all of these things and then some. Today, we welcome Mr. Wong. Hello.
Hi, Bill.
It's good to see you.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure. I haven't seen you for a number of years.
It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. You used to be so involved with then my community, the Portuguese community. Mm-hmm. And I used to see you a lot.
Those were great days.
Those were great days, and we're going to talk a little bit about them a little later. You were born in Fort Erie, Ontario. Your parents, what did they do then?
My father immigrated from China in 1923.
Wow.
About 5 months before the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed in Parliament. So I'm pleased that he came to Canada, made it here. And
at that time, yeah.
Right, at that time. And
what did he do? What did he do?
To make a long story short, he joined his brother, who ran a restaurant in London, Ontario. Oh. And then later, my father came to the town of Fort Erie and started his own restaurant there. Right.
So you had a restaurant business. Your mom?
My mother, she was a mother and a housewife, and began to raise my sister, my younger sister, and myself. Yeah. And unfortunately, before I turned the age of 4, my mother died in the hospital.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So as a young kid of 4 years old, you grow up quickly. But her family is something we can talk about. But then about 2 years later, my father remarried. And my stepmother was actually a nurse who had grown up in Vernon, BC, and studied at the Vancouver General Hospital. Yeah. So I have several families.
She raised you?
Yes, in essence, yes.
Now, you mentioned a sister?
Yes.
Any other siblings, or just the two
of
you?
Yes. I have a brother from my stepmother, that side of the family.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And he is an MD, PhD. Mm-hmm. He spent many years head of the imaging and radiology at Johns Hopkins, and recently went to Wash U in St. Louis, Missouri.
How big was the Chinese community in Fort Erie?
Quite small, I would say perhaps 20 or 25 individuals.
It was small.
Several families, yes, quite small, yes.
How did the Chinese community fit in the larger community?
In Fort Erie, I would say they fit in quite well. My father, my family, all the other families that I recall were, they integrated well, and there wasn't any friction or anything.
No friction, yeah. What kind of kid were you?
Well, I wonder sometimes. It's a wonderful town to grow up in, especially in the summer months. The Niagara River is there.
It's beautiful.
Yes, it is. It's just beautiful, that whole Niagara Parkway.
But what kind of kid were you? Were you a quiet kid, rambunctious, full of energy?
I think I was on the quiet side of hopefully normal. We used to love swimming in the river at the time. Today, I don't know if I would do it. because of the temperature. It's cooler than you think, and I'm not sure about how clean the river is these days.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
But we really enjoyed that as kids, and it was a wonderful town to grow up in.
You have good memories about that.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Now, you got your education. You started in school in Fort Erie for both public school and secondary school. Right. What were your main interests at this time?
My main interests were mathematics, physics, languages. I studied Latin and French. And
Latin?
Did well, yes.
It's good to know languages.
Oh, I know. So, but I wish I had stuck with it because perhaps I'd be speaking better Portuguese or something.
No, you speak English very well, and that's good enough for me.
Okay.
Now, where does this interest of so-called hard sciences like math and physics, where does it come from?
I'm not sure. I think it's an innate thing that you either like it or you don't like it.
Yeah.
I do recall our math teacher in grade 11 who taught us Euclidean geometry. To me, it was very deductive. It was very clear.
Yeah.
And that was an eye-opener. You could see the world in an orderly way. And then the following year, it was Cartesian, analytical, geometry.
And that was important to you.
Yeah, these were the things that really introduced me to math. Yeah.
Now, you had a summer job.
I did.
As a customs and immigration officer. We have a picture back there. You look so officious in that outfit. Was this while you were in high school?
No, it was while I was at university.
Oh, okay.
And everything was very formal in those days. We had the uniform and the caps. And
how did you get the job?
Well, with some foresight, my father had noticed that a number of the other young people had gotten summer jobs there while going to university and suggested I might look into it. So I did. And it was a wonderful way to pass the summers because in addition to really learning and understanding the Immigration Act and the Citizenship Act every year in case there were changes, it was also a wonderful time when aside from the work and earning some dollars to go to university, one had the time to, and I used to set aside 20 book titles, and during the year just collect the odd book and say, I want to read that and I want to read that, even if something that I didn't know anything about, simply to learn. Because I knew that people, at least I felt that people who studied sciences and mathematics sometimes were accused of being too narrow in their thinking. But I was curious in any event. So,
you mentioned university. You studied math and physics at the University of Toronto.
I did.
That's where you got your undergraduate degree. Then you went to York University for an MBA in finance. You took some courses at Harvard, University of Waterloo, New York University at Calgary. So you were fully educated.
Thank you.
On the subject.
Well, yeah, it helped to round things out.
Now, you had some employment going before politics, and this was, you were a teacher at Northview Heights Collegiate in Toronto. And it's fascinating because you taught the first computer science courses in Ontario. This is historical.
To high school students, right.
To high school students.
Right.
And you authored the book at the time. Wow. This is all of a sudden, you're a teacher, you're an author. This must have been very exciting for you.
Well, it's interesting. It's, I guess, having the luck of being in the right place at the right time. When the province of Ontario and the Minister of Education at the time, who was Bill Davis, decided that it was time to introduce a computer and computing into the high schools of Ontario, they selected Northview Heights.
Yeah.
The principal, Bill Newnham, had been a math teacher himself.
Yeah.
And in any event, the principal and the math head, very good friend of mine, Gord Nichols, decided that here's the guy to do it because he's the latest graduate out of university and has taken some courses, has studied some computer science, so he'd be the ideal person. So I agreed, and so I started teaching it. And then one day I was called into the staff room, and I was told that Sir Isaac Pittman of Canada was there. So I met with these two people, and they said, yes, we're here, and we hear that you're writing a book. And I said, no, I'm not so sure about that. I said, I'm simply making some notes so that the next year, I'll have a plan and And they said, no, we'd like you to please write a book. So that's how that got
And you
started.
did.
And I did. And so again, it was a pleasure and interesting to write
This
it.
book was entitled, tell me if I'm wrong, Computing an Introduction.
That's correct, yeah. Very elementary, but aimed, targeted at teenage students at the high school
This
level.
was new territory, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were breaking new ground there, and it was certainly something that these young people
Now,
could
you
absorb.
also co-authored another book, did you not?
Yes, it was a booklet, and Top Clark, another publisher, came into the school and asked if I would participate and co-author a book that's just focused on algorithms, and that would have been with Gord Nichols, the math head, with Dr. Tom Hull, the head of computer science at the University of Toronto, and myself.
Yeah. Now, by this time, you're well known in certain circles. I think your name was already well known in your work, your pioneering work.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
And then you go to Ottawa to work as a special assistant to the Minister of National Health and Welfare. So you go from this to a political kind of world. What were you thinking?
Well, number one, let me say that I loved mathematics, and I couldn't believe when I started teaching math that a teacher, an individual, would actually get paid for just talking about these wonderful abstract ideas.
Yeah.
And in any event, I was doing all of that, and knew that at some point I'd probably want to have a sabbatical year and do something different. And I had decided in my own mind that my interest was to work on Parliament Hill and get to understand the inner workings of government. Part of that may have been stimulated by my youth growing up in my hometown, or it may have been when I came to U of T. When you see that there are other people around you who are less fortunate, need your assistance, need your help, it kind of does something to your being. And for me, it was that sense of wanting to contribute to society in some way. And so to just give you a little more of the logic, one day I went to Hamilton, Ontario, where my aunt and uncle ran a restaurant, tavern, and John Munro, the Member of Parliament, would go there frequently. It was in his riding, Hamilton East. And I said to John one day when I had met him there, I said, John, I'm interested in working on Parliament Hill. If you see an opportunity, could you please let me know? And so that's kind of how it got started.
And then you did this with the Minister of National Health and Welfare between 68 and 70. And then you continued by becoming also involved with the Canada's first Minister of State for Multiculturalism, 1972. Did you have liberal connections? Were you a party person by this time, or?
Yes, I was for sure. Remember that I campaigned for John Munro.
Oh, John Munro from Hamilton, yeah.
Hamilton East, right? Steel town,
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah.
And that was the June 25th, 1968 election when Pierre Elliott Trudeau won with a big majority.
That's right.
Right? And all the young people who were in Munro's campaign.
He electrified people.
He did, yes.
He moved people, young people. Yeah, he was a refreshing presence, yeah, for sure.
Right, and I certainly did a lot for
you
him
got
and the
swept
Liberal Party
by that, eh?
later years. But
Yeah.
just to finish off on
Yes.
I did go to Ottawa July the 2nd, I think it was, 1968. John Munro had been appointed Minister of National Health and Welfare.
That's right.
And all the young people working on the campaign, of course, wanted to be on the staff. And fortunately, I was one of the individuals.
Were chosen, yeah.
And so I did go to Parliament Hill. And so I spent 2 wonderful years there.
Yeah.
Exciting times.
Yeah.
And then I came back
Yeah.
to Toronto to complete my MBA.
Ah.
And 4 of us started our own company. And then the 72 election came along, and Dr. Stanley Hydash, I helped him in that campaign.
Was he from Parkdale?
Toronto Parkdale,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
correct.
yeah.
And he was re-elected again. And he was appointed Canada's Minister of State, as you said.
Yeah.
First one for multiculturalism.
The first one, yeah.
And he and his wife, Natalie, invited my wife and myself for dinner. And it was at a Chinese restaurant, Lychee Gardens. So I knew something was up. Now, what was he trying to do? Dr. Hydash basically said, I want you to come to Ottawa, and I want you to, be my executive assistant and do, what you did, for Mr. Munro and so forth.
Yeah.
And I said, Stan, I can't do that. I've just got married the year before. 4 of us have started a company, and I have responsibilities there.
Yeah.
And so we compromised, and I was back and forth to Ottawa that year.
Okay.
Once, sometimes twice a week.
Now, between 72 and 87, you got into the world of finance. With all this experience at Parliament Hill, it never occurred to you to run for politics?
It did occur, to be honest with you. And
so why didn't you?
well, in the early 70s, I decided that, politics and running for office is a wonderful thing to do. There comes a time when you're not elected. Either you get knocked off or you choose or for health reasons or whatever. And I just thought it would be wiser to have a fallback plan.
Yes.
And so I had started down the path of finance and investments.
Oh, yeah.
And
in a big
so
way, huh?
Thank you. And so that's why I decided at that time not to run for office.
Yeah.
And I also thought my friend John Munro was very lucky at a very young age.
Yeah.
He was appointed minister, but that isn't always the case. And I think that a good prime minister in selecting people for his cabinet is actually looking for people who are qualified.
Yeah, and have some experience.
Yeah,
you had like 15 years in the world of finance. I have a list here of some of the titles you had with a certain number of companies. chairman, vice president. I don't even know if I can pronounce this word. Of various companies. 15 years, eh?
Yeah, we started with one company, 4 of us, grew to 35 people in a half a dozen years.
Yeah.
Then we took over another company that had 35
Yeah.
people, so now we had 70.
Yeah.
And we started building branches across Canada. And then I guess from I have to figure it out, but we ended up with 200 staff
Wow.
and about 10 offices across Canada. And then it was the mid-'80s, and Walwyn Stodgel came along, a much larger firm,
Yes,
and they wanted to acquire us.
that's right. I have.
And yeah, and my 2 older partners were thinking about retirement, and the younger directors, officers, we weren't thinking of that. But we decided whatever decision we made, it would be all making the same decision.
Yeah.
So we decided, yeah, it would be strategically better. So we sold to the larger firm.
Yeah.
And to make a long story short, after 2 years there, my original partner and I decided, it'd be nice to get back to a small firm again where we could just build something from the start. And that's when we both joined Dominic, which had one office,
Yes.
to build it coast to coast
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
But then a year later, I ran
Yeah.
for elected office.
That's right. In 87.
87.
In
yeah.
87, finally, you felt
Finally.
that you had the background necessary
Thank
to run. And you were elected in 87 as an MPP to the Ontario legislature. Premier David Peterson then. Now, I have a list, an impressive list here of things you did. You were Minister of Citizenship, and then, but before that, you were Minister of Energy in 87. So you enter politics. You're not an MPP backbencher for too long, were you?
No, we were elected that year on September the 10th,
Yeah.
1987. I think it was about 2 weeks later, September 28th, I do recall.
Oh my
The
God.
Premier called
Yeah.
our home, and he invited me to
And you
join
became
the
minister so fast. A lot
Thank
of
you.
other MPPs, they start as assistants, parliamentary assistants. Not you.
I was very lucky, and thank
I think it's more than luck.
my friend, Mr. Peterson, because
Yeah.
I thought that he must have had some good advisors, or he was very astute, because I felt that I had the background for energy, that portfolio.
Yeah.
On Bay Street, I had certainly studied as a securities
That's
analyst,
right.
and looked at the oil and gas sector, had
Yeah.
been down to Houston and out to Calgary many times. And
What do you think was your biggest accomplishment as Minister of Energy?
well, I would say that we spent a lot of time rebuilding, reorienting the Power Corporation Act, which is all about the electricity system, reliable, supplies of electrical energy to Ontarians. And actually, when there was a portfolio change, I moved on, and my successor passed the legislation, made tweaked with her changes.
This is the legislation that controlled the Ontario Hydro.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That is correct. Yeah. The largest electric utility in North America at the time.
Oh,
And,
yeah?
yeah.
Then, in 89, this is the second time around when you were reelected. You became Minister of Citizenship, right?
Well, I was still elected for that first time.
Oh,
And,
okay. When you were...
Yeah, Minister of Energy. And I was going to add that having studied physics and having studied nuclear physics, our nuclear reactors in Ontario certainly were something I was comfortable with. And then I grew up, as you know, in the town of Fort Erie, which is 20 miles. We used to swim in the Niagara River, which 20 miles down the road
Yeah.
was Niagara Falls. So the hydroelectric, it just seemed that I was very comfortable in that portfolio.
Oh.
And then the Premier shuffled his portfolio, and I noticed at that time that three of us who were in economic policy portfolios
Yeah.
ended up in social policy side and vice versa. So I ended up in the citizenship portfolio. And again, very lucky in the sense that, first of all, as a Canadian, I'm not Anglophone or Francophone. I'm part of the larger, broader, diverse, multicultural
Yes.
society. So I grew up in an immigrant family. My summer job, as you mentioned, was with immigration and customs, and so I
That's
certainly
right.
had that exposure. And as I indicated,
You have that gene.
so
Yeah, this ministry was responsible for race relations, multiculturalism, and the Ontario Human Rights Commission. And you did this for a
was
year?
that 1 year?
See?
That's correct. And also, I would say settlement issues. And again, in the Chinese community, there are these family associations.
Yeah.
The Wongs and the Lems and the Lees and the different family groups. And they have their headquarters. And if you were to walk into one of these, as I did when I was a young kid, you would see that these were places where people could retain their heritage and culture, which is part of the multiculturalism policy. But if you were a newcomer to Canada and didn't know how to use the bank or the credit union, you would simply go to your family association and say, out of my pay, here's $50 a week. And so you'd be depositing it and it would be kept track of. And down the road, if you were starting your own business and you wanted to borrow some funds, you could do it there. So in a sense, the idea of settlement, and Ontario had, different agencies that would do that, settlement organizations. Here was already happening, taking place in the Chinese and other communities, I would say.
With this ministry, I remember you became a sort of advocate. Would you say that was your main role as Minister of Citizenship? You advocated for better race relations and stuff like that.
Yes, yes, for sure. Diversity and
you were all over the place promoting multiculturalism
and harmonious race relations and human rights. Again, it was an interesting intersection of situations because obviously the Premier would be the most popular and the one that people would want to invite to their events. And we're talking about the GTA at the moment. But he's very busy and much of the time could not. So then it would go to the shoulders of the ministers. And then so you look around at the different ministers who are in the GTA. And of course, ministers are from all over, all parts of Ontario. So there might be 4 or 5 ministers from the GTA. And it just seems that citizenship was the one portfolio that...
Yeah, you sort of became a sort of vice premier.
No, I wouldn't say that. No, let's say that I enjoyed meeting the communities.
It's my words.
Okay, thank you.
Now, outside of Queen's Park, you were involved in a lot of other things. I actually did not know this until I read your biography. You're a founding director of multilingual television, then called Channel 47, now called Omni Television.
Well,
how did this come about?
One day I received a call from Dan Yanuzzi.
Then the owner?
Yes. Well, Dan was the publisher of Courier Canadese, largest Italian newspaper, daily newspaper outside of Rome, Italy itself. But, and Dan wanted to move to the electronic media. And Dan Yanuzzi and Al Bruner, who actually started the Global Television Network, were working on this together. and they were putting together a board of directors. And one day, Mr. Yanutzi called me and asked if we could have a coffee together and just talk. I didn't know what he wanted to talk about, but he basically invited me to join this new team, founding directors. And he recognized that I had worked on Parliament Hill, and of course, one of the tasks was to get approval from the CRTC. He recognized that I was from Bay Street, the world of finance, and the company would be needing funds. And thirdly, because it was multilingual television, he wanted all the diverse languages represented and so forth.
Were you the Minister of Citizenship then?
No, I wasn't. No. This was before.
Oh, this was?
Yeah, this was about a decade before.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And that's how you got involved.
So that's how I got involved, and it was a struggle in the beginning, but we all worked hard. There were a lot of creative people there.
Yeah.
And then around 1985-ish, mid-80s, the Yanutzi family, who owned 70% of all the shares, decided to sell 50%
to Rogers.
Control block to Rogers. And that's when Mr. Ted Rogers and John Torrey, our current mayor, became the new directors.
Yeah.
And the Yanutzi family continued to own 20%
that's right.
now.
You also were involved, I'll just read the list here, the Multimedia Capital Corporation, Sky Continental Management, Inc., World Television Network, Confederation Trust Company, International Growth Funders, Inc., McVicker Minerals, Inc. So you had all kinds of involvements with all kinds of organizations and companies.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting, and those were all interesting positions, and you meet interesting people. You're hopefully helping to shape and help companies to get stronger and help our society to get better. And
directorships in a variety of companies. It's just the list goes on and on.
Well, many of them were private companies. Some of them were public companies. And some of them were just non-profit organizations. And
you were the vice chair of CAA Central Ontario.
Yes, and I actually spent 16 years on the board of CAA, and South Central Ontario represents most of Ontario, and 2 million members out of, at that time, 5 million CAA members across Canada. But in 2005, I was fortunate to have been elected the chair of CAA for this part of Ontario, and later CAA, the national organization. But that's a wonderful organization because it started off as a volunteer organization to give people peace of mind, especially when they're on the road. But then they also got into businesses like insurance, auto insurance, casualty insurance, property insurance, and also into the travel area. So it was just a wonderful organization to be a part of.
Now, after politics, you were involved as vice chairman of Leon Fraser and Associates Inc. Are you still a senior portfolio manager there? Are you still?
Yes. Leon Fraser was established in 1939. That was before my time. Second oldest portfolio management firm, I think, in Canada. But
it's big.
But in any event, Leon Fraser has been around for all that length of time, and the principles have basically passed on. And about 2 years ago, Canadian Western Bank, headquartered in Edmonton, acquired Leon Fraser.
Yeah. And you're still involved?
Yes. Keeps my mind active, Bill.
Oh, yes. You're a restless soul in a good way.
Thank you.
You've been involved in the community at large in many, many ways. You're a past chair of St. Stephen's Capital Campaign 2000, director of St. Stephen's Community House, which I know very well.
Mm-hmm.
All kinds of professional affiliations, and so on and so on. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Chinese community and the Portuguese community. Now, I don't know if you still are involved this way, but you've been a member of the Mandarin Club, actually past director and advisor of the Mandarin School, a founding director of the Canadian Foundation for the Preservation of Chinese Cultural and Historical Treasures, advisor on the Committee on Christianity in China. Wow. Director of the Chinese Cultural Center of Greater Toronto. So you never turned your back away from your community. You actually have been involved quite a bit, eh?
Yeah, and it's, I don't know how to explain it except that if you're gregarious in nature then and you want to, help make, the community a better place, then you do get involved. Yeah. The one that you mentioned about Christianity in China, to me, I'm not an expert at all on any of this, but a doctor, Professor Mark Toulouse, who was the head of Emmanuel College at the time.
That's right.
He has a string of letters behind his name. They're so long that I couldn't remember them all.
Yeah.
But he was the main proponent behind this idea of having this conference. And because of my connection, knowledge of the Chinese community, he just wanted to invite me to be part of that. And I found it very interesting because speakers came from different parts of the world, some of them from Asia. And
Is it correct to say that you were the first, certainly in Ontario, the first minister in a government in Ontario of Chinese background? Were you the first?
Yes. And actually, I think the first in Canada.
Really?
And so that's, and so I feel it's an honor to, be in this position. And but when I think about it, I'm really thinking about the young people because Canada is a land of opportunity.
Yeah.
And if I can be a little bit of an example for some young people who are trying to find their way.
And you were, and you have been, for sure. You were also a bit of an inspiration to the Portuguese community.
Well, I love the Portuguese community too.
I remember you being in all kinds of events. I think you went to Portugal on a trip.
1990, yes.
Was it 1990? How did this come about?
Well, I don't remember all the details, but I know that Dr. Mota Amaral, the premier,
the president of the
Azores, and other leaders from Portugal who had come to Canada. Dr. Correa de Jesus, he and I had a good friendship.
Correa de Jesus was a consulate?
He was a minister at one point. And,
in Portugal,
and anyway, we just felt that it would be a good idea, and Ontario had never sent a cabinet minister to Portugal. And the community, the Portuguese community,
Another first.
And in any event, so some friends in the Portuguese community here in Ontario helped me in the government. So it was a two-sided effort to organize this visit to Portugal in order to share many of our common interests. And
it was a sort of a goodwill.
Goodwill, right? And in addition, the community, the Portuguese community, which I visited often here in the GTA, individuals would always be asking me, have you been here? Have you been there? And
Yeah.
when are you going to Portugal?
Yeah.
And so it all worked out fine. And I do recall it was July the 1st of that year, Canada Day. And so we ended up in 4 fishing villages on the southwest coast, I think, of Portugal. I remember going to Sines and some of the other places.
Oh, yeah?
And the Canadian flag was raised 4
Well,
times, or we
you
celebrated.
were a dignitary from
Thank you. Yeah, it was
Ontario,
quite,
from Canada. That's so you have good memories about that.
Good memories of Portugal, yes.
Yeah. Now, you've had quite a few recognitions, awards along the way. I have a list here, but I don't know if it's exhaustive or not. I don't think it is. You were named the Analyst of the Year when you were doing your financial work, 1980, by the Financial Times of Canada.
Very lucky again.
Wow.
Well, it all depends on the criteria that, is used.
But you were recognized by some people. And that's a great title.
Thank you.
You were also the recipient of the, am I pronounced this correctly, the Courvoisier Award for Leadership. The Arbor Award for Outstanding Volunteer Service to the University of Toronto. Queen's Diamond Jubilee Award 2012. Distinguished Alumni Award from Victoria College, University of Toronto in 2012, and so on and so on. Now, did these awards influence you in any way in your work?
No, because they came after. I did the work first. But
Did they motivate you in any way to continue doing other stuff? Did they affect you in any way?
Well, I think it reinforces that maybe, what I've been doing is in the right direction, let's put it that way. And I'd also like to say that I'm very proud recently to have received the Distinguished Alumni Award for Public Contribution from Schulich. So I'm wearing the Schulich pin today.
Wow.
Schulich Business School.
I didn't have that on my list here. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah.
We knew you from your work and your involvement in the community, but we also knew a little bit about your distinguished wife, Dr. Alice Dong, a medical doctor.
Yes, she is, yes.
Now, I saw her involved with you in campaigns. She played quite a role as a so-called political wife. Did she not?
She did, absolutely. My first campaign manager used to remind Alice that she was he called her the second most important person in the campaign.
There you go. Yeah.
And she was, she's a real trooper, and she,
Yeah.
really got involved.
Maybe the best award you've had.
Exactly. Exactly.
You have children, right?
No, we don't. We've got 18 nieces and nephews.
Wow.
And they've got kids of theirs.
Large family.
And that's more than 18 there. So it's
and that's more than one can handle.
It is.
Very good. Now, aside from your very busy life that you've had, any hobbies, any time for yourself?
I would say reading has always been a hobby with me, and traveling also.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you've gone to a number of places?
Well, yes, I think that Alice and I have been to many places around the world. When I graduated with my undergraduate degree, my roommate at university, he and I went to Europe that year, and I recall traveling for 100 days. It was exactly 100 days in Europe, and we visited 22 countries.
That was a big thing to do then.
Yeah. And he was studying law at the time, and his international law professor said to him, you're going to Europe. Are you thinking about going to the other side of the Iron Curtain, as he called it? And well, we hadn't thought about it. And to make a long story short,
Yeah.
we did end up on one of those package tours to Russia, where we saw Moscow, Leningrad, Kiev, and Yalta, and then down the Danube River,
Yeah.
and then spent the last 80 days, on this side, but of the Iron Curtain, and it was a wonderfully eye-opening experience.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Traveling
Yes.
can be. We unfortunately are on the final stretch. There's so much more I'd like to talk about. But, television sometimes has these constraints. But I wanted your final thoughts on something. I have a feeling, and maybe I'm not accurate, but I feel that over the years, the political scene in Canada, maybe all over the world, is filled with more and more uncertainty. More leaders are being challenged by their own parties. There are more political wings. It sounds as if party unity is becoming more fragile. What are your thoughts on this? Am I reading too much into what's happening, or?
No, I agree with you on that, and I think part of it is the 24-hour, minute-by-minute media coverage.
Yeah.
When something happens, very quickly,
Yeah.
you hear about it through the media, so people have to react faster.
Yeah.
They're bombarded with more thoughts and ideas.
And this brings about more emotions.
Yes, it does, and you get polarized
Yeah.
groups. And
Yeah.
yeah.
I was thinking of the 2018 election in Ontario. And I don't know if these two things are connected, but we have a Liberal government with a huge majority, going from that to losing its party status within 4 years? I've asked this of Charles Sousa the other day, but
okay.
but he had a different take probably. What do you think happened?
Well, it always gets down to the people. They are the voters. They are always correct in whatever the collective decision is.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But I do think it's just one of those episodal things that we're going to have with the more violent swings that we were just talking about. But I think what could happen, being an optimist, is that liberal values, Liberal Party values, have been known and accepted by Ontarians for many decades.
A long time, yeah.
Yeah, a long time. And I think that it could very well happen that if we work hard and enunciate proper, clear vision and policies, that we could very quickly recover
Regain
and get
power.
there. Yes.
Yeah, we have an election in 2022. We'll see what happens, right?
Yes, we will.
It was joyful to see you again and to talk to you, and I want to thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Bill, for inviting me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll see you soon, I hope.
See you soon.
And thank you to our audience for being with us. Till next time. Thank you.